One.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. I'm Jackson Danner with my good friend Omar. We're going to be talking over the Walter Payton Award, Buck Buchanan. We're going to have for the first time this year, we're going to talk about kickers and some games to watch this weekend.
I'm pretty excited. It was a wild weekend in FCS, namely the OVC, as they had, I think, a quadruple overtime game with Austin P. And of course, our kicker that we're going to mention later on, Antonio Zita, man of the week, man of the hour.
And I'm kind of tipping my hat to what we're going to talk about in the Buck Buchanan portion of the show. But we got two big man touchdowns this week on the defensive line too. So we're going to be talking over that. But first, the Walter Payton Award. And I'll go ahead and I think this is a consensus number one guy, Eric Schmid, the quarterback from Sam Houston State. 71-17 win versus Nicholls, who had put up similar victory numbers earlier in the year. 366 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He threw 21 for 32. He's only 2 games in, but he's already at 6 yards short of 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. And I think the front runner for the Walter Payton.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. They only have 2 games. They had a game postponed. Schmid's my first guy too. He's a threat on the ground as well as the passing numbers, averaging 7 yards a carry with 92 yards in a small sample size. But really, that matchup against Nicholls State, I think, put him in the front running because Nicholls State was the hype of the Southland and maybe the FCS in the first couple of weeks. I know we liked Nicholls a lot, but they didn't only go pound for pound; they dismantled them.
At least on this podcast, they were the most hyped up team. Yeah, they just dismantled them, like you said, and it was brutal. Yeah, it was rough. I had to turn it off. I ended up watching other games. I was hoping Nicholls could pull it off, but no. I was like, man, this is going to be a great comeback. No, it was not. So who you got for another, maybe not the front runner, but another guy we need to start looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, we both agreed on Schmid. I'm going to go with another Eric who plays quarterback, and I think we agree on this guy too. But Eric Barrier, who has he has over 1,400 yards, I believe. Oh no, 1,200 yards, but averaging 400 yards a game in Eastern Washington. That system has produced Cooper Kupp, Bo Levi Mitchell for UCFL fans, and he has 10 touchdowns in the air. Only that one loss against Idaho, but even then he was lights out with 339 yards. And again, the big sky looks like it's Eastern Washington or Weber State. That should be a huge showdown later on in the year when that one happens.
And he's doing it at a 61% completion rate, which is pretty impressive for how much he's throwing the ball. And I know the 4 interceptions, but so far it hasn't really made an impact. He did have, I think it was 2 interceptions in this past game and 1 in the each. So as long as he can bring that down to 1, hopefully 0 interceptions a game. Yeah, Barrier is, I don't know how to say his name quite, but Eric Barrier, yeah, he can definitely be not the front runner, but definitely a second place and a guy we're definitely talking about for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I'd say it just depends on that Weber State game. Like if they can beat Weber State, who's number 2 and FCS is 2-0, had a great win against Idaho State, but stumbled a bit this past weekend against a scrappy UC Davis team. So they look kind of vulnerable. I think it all depends on that, really, for Barrier versus Schmid for the Walter Payton.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy moving into our next guy, someone I wanted to bring up that we haven't talked about on the podcast so far this year, a running back, which typically this is a quarterback award, but Julius Chestnut, a running back from Sacred Heart. In his last game, he had 23 carries, 203 yards, 4 touchdowns, and about 46 reception yards. He's only 2 games in, which is probably why we haven't talked about him. 2 games played, 46 carries, 371 yards, and 8 touchdowns, no fumbles, right below 6 yards a carry. If he keeps this up for the rest of the year, then we're definitely talking about him. So he's 2 games in, not enough of a sample size, but definitely someone I think should be on the radar.
And I agree to an extent there, Jackson. Those are amazing numbers out there at Sacred Heart in Fairfield. He's in that nice New York City market playing on Sundays out there in Fairfield. But the thing is, it's like the scheduling. There's hurdles with conferences like the NEC, the Northeast Conference, or the Patriot League with Holy Cross and whatnot, where they're playing like very abbreviated schedules. Like the NEC's got a 4-game schedule and the conference championship game, which it looks like there. The NEC's, you typically got like a lot of parity. Looks like that's the case this year in the short season, with Sacred Heart being the front runner and Central Connecticut State, last year's champion, not playing. So I think that's a hurdle. Maybe we can see a Jarrett Patterson effect. He keeps it going and has like a 300 400 yard game that really astonishes everyone. But I think it's good to go with the running back. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go with Otis Weah, a guy whose workload isn't heavy, but metrics guys, I think they love him because he's extra efficient running the ball. He's averaging 110 yards a game of total offense, or 100 total yards a game of running the ball, 441 yards on only 63 carries, averaging 7 yards a clip, but he's averaging only about 16 carries a game on a North Dakota team, more importantly, that is in the top 5 and has really ran through the MVFC in their first year. So I think Otis Weah is another running back to look at for this award.
He's not necessarily having the production of a running back winning the the Walter Payton. But, being on a school like North Dakota, where you're getting not necessarily more airtime, but you're getting paid more attention to. If you're a casual FCS follower, you're more likely watching North Dakota than Sacred Heart or Rhode Island, a guy I'm about to talk to there. So yeah, absolutely. I think he should. Weah's had a great year so far, and hopefully he can keep that up and even improve his numbers just a little bit more to be a serious contender. Another guy that I'm not saying that he should necessarily even be on the radar. We're going to be talking about him every week, but if he keeps up what he had in his debut, we might. Kevin Brown Jr., a running back from Rhode Island, and a 40-37 win versus Villanova. He had 20 carries, 141 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, it was Rhode Island's debut game, but, we just said the same thing about Jarrett Patterson, when, like you just mentioned, when he had his phenomenal year last year. So something to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Brown just kind of toned it down a bit, but yeah, he had an impressive game. I thought we should at least mention him.
For sure. The CAA looks kind of open, a lot like the MVFC. It's always those two conferences, as we mentioned before, with Villanova ranked in the top 10 losing in their second game, and James Madison looking a bit vulnerable in their last 2 games, and I think their game got postponed against Richmond this weekend. But the CAA looks more open than normal. So maybe a team like Rhode Island, Delaware looks like a front runner there. Delaware's been dominant against 2 solid teams, Stony Brook and Maine in the first game. I think they played Maine. So yeah, we'll have to see the CAA. Definitely a conference to look at. I think I'm going to go with another running back, someone that we mentioned, or you mentioned at least. You brought to my attention last week, Brian Snead. Just really putting up really good numbers out there in Clarksville, Tennessee for Austin Peay. But kind of toned it down this past week with the 138 against Southeast Missouri. Had a 227-yard game, the week before against Tennessee State. 4 touchdowns, 522 yards. He played a bit in the fall, had 3 fall games, so averaging about 90 yards a game. But if he just keeps it up, this guy is getting a good workload, unlike a guy like Otis Weah getting only like 16 carries per game. He's right here. He's got 23 and 25 his last 2 games. So definitely a guy to look out for. The one hurdle is Austin Peay is not looking like a playoff contender at the moment, as they started off their combined fall and spring season at 0-4. So might be a hurdle there for Snead, but great year nonetheless. And I think just the workload he gets puts him in a position as a running back for the Walter Payton Award.
Yeah, he has a better workload than some of the guys we talked about. And his last game versus Tennessee State, he had so much production for over 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. But yeah, he's definitely a guy that we can continue to look at. Now, if he has one more bad game, I don't know that we talk about him again. But if he can play like he did against Tennessee State, yeah, why not? He's having a great year. I think that was all of our Walter Payton Award guys. But one guy I wanted to mention that I was very disappointed in this week, Mark Granowski, a guy we talked about last week, the quarterback for South Dakota State, 12 for 28, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and only 158 yards coming out of a 4-touchdown performance. I mean, they ended up winning, but it was despite Granowski's play. It was not, he did not have a good game at all. And I kind of took him off my list for the Walter Payton just following that, because he just had a terrible game. And I hope he ends up doing better, but just 12 for 28 just leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and that's one thing you can count on the MVFC, just tough defense. Whether it's North Dakota State, Southern Illinois, Youngstown State has been putting up some tough defensive outings. Their offense hasn't been too hot, but it's just tough. It's a mixed bag each week, which might be a hurdle for Otis Weah. And it's been a hurdle, too, for Tommy Schuster, a guy that we mentioned early on as sort of like the face of that North Dakota team. But his numbers haven't been great. And I think that's just because of the defenses out in the MVFC. One more guy that I wanted to talk about before. Sorry about that, Jackson. But Ty King out of Samford, a wide receiver. I think if there's a wide receiver you want to keep your eye on, it's going to be him, because he returns kicks. He catches the ball at a great clip. He had 4 catches for 115 against Furman. This past week against Wofford, 7 catches for 178 in an upset victory over the Terriers, and 408 yards returning the ball on kicks, over 20 yards a return. And this is a Samford program that produced everyone's favorite backup quarterback, Devlin Duck Hodges. So they're on the radar. And this week, their big game, which we'll talk about later on, against VMI. But yeah, sorry, Jackson.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think, like we had mentioned, I think on last week's podcast, if a receiver is going to win, it's probably going to have to take more than just receiving. You're going to have to make an impact on special teams, even running the ball, something like that, to kind of get on the radar, because this is not a wide receiver award. Now, wide receivers have won it, but it's just the exception. It goes to a quarterback unless someone stands out. So we'll go ahead and move on to the Buck Buchanan Award. Omar, do you want to go ahead and go first on this one?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if this is a guy that's your front runner, but my front runner for sure. I have trumpeted the praises of the VMI Keydets defense. Surprising, given that I go to West Point. But he, Connor Riddle, 8 tackles for loss in 3 games for this really emerging VMI team looking for their first winning season since 81. I feel like if you had $1 every time I mention that stat, you'd be able to buy yourself a nice combo meal from Wendy, a nice 4 for 4 or a 2. But 28 total tackles, and you can even go with his partner in crime, Stone Snyder, at 4 sacks, 27 tackles. But that VMI defense has looked impeccable, granted against weaker competition, but it's been one of the best stories in this early spring FCS season.
I mean, they have through a few games, they have guys that have had at least 1 sack a game, and it's impressive. It's kind of like there's no clear leader, in my opinion, when you look at the stat sheet for VMI, but it's kind of like that Dolphins no-name defense where it's like really good, but there's like not one like elite player on there. But yeah, I mean, they need to keep doing what they're doing. And I'm not sure of VMI's schedule, but if I remember, they had like a couple tests left on the schedule to see, because they're gonna face some better offenses throughout the year. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure if that was your guy, Jackson.
It was not. I have Jamani Crane, a defensive lineman from Jackson State. He had 3 solo, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, a touchdown, and 1 Dion dance. And their win last Sunday versus Mississippi Valley State. Now, I think we've all seen the highlight of Crane, dancing into the end zone, and Deion Sanders, hyping him up and all that. But I want to mention him because he is the only player on Jackson State defense to register a tackle for loss in every game he's played. So he has had a good year. He's the leader of the team in TFLs, if you didn't figure that out from that stat. And I think if he continues to have a great year, I mean, this is a front seven award. So it's something that we can definitely maybe see him compete for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was unable to watch the ESPN outing of Mississippi Valley State, Jackson State. They gave us some extra privileges here for once. They threw us a bone. um, but yeah, no, for sure. Anytime a big man scores a touchdown, it's sort of like that Tyrann Mathieu effect where you make big plays on defense, like high impact plays, not just loading the stat sheet. Like, I mean, you're in the front running, I'd say, for the Buck Buchanan. I'd agree. Uh, my next guy, I had Jackson Hanky just out of North Dakota State, just out of sheer amount of tackles, 43 tackles in 4 games. Heart and soul of the defense, arguably a guy that's just all over the field. And when you think front seven, you always think about like pass rushers, and you always think about ball hawking linebacker, or maybe not ball hawking, but as linebackers that are around the field the whole time. And North Dakota State's very much still in the MVFC race, and they are, of course, the biggest brand name for sure still. I mean, North Dakota may be the best team at the moment, but they are the biggest brand name, which could help a little bit in the Buck Buchanan race for Hanky.
Absolutely. I don't know. I think we kind of need to do some more research on how these awards are voted on. But if it's anything like the Heisman and the FBS level awards, then they're very casual watchers. So if you're from one of those names, big name schools like NDSU, it certainly helps. My next guy is another guy from Sam Houston State. He's not the front runner for the Buck Buchanan, in my opinion, but we could have a double Sam Houston State winner. Jahari K, a defensive lineman, again in that 71-17 win versus Nicholls. He had 5 tackles, 2.5 TFLs, 2 forced fumbles, and a pick 6. So he had a phenomenal game as a defensive lineman. Now he's only played 2 games, but he does have 3.5 TFLs, the 2 forced fumbles, the interception, and 2 quarterback hurries. So nothing too special in the first game, but a monster game versus Nicholls. I think it definitely puts him on the radar considering he did that against such a potent offense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, extra points like that, and like it wasn't a shootout. Yeah, I mean the Bearcats of Sam Houston scored 71, but they held Nicholls to 17, and poor Lindsey Scott. Whether you like it or not, Jackson, because of the name. He was shut down and he was corralled. So I say extra points for that. And, if they continue, I mean, for sure.
You know what? We're going to go off topic for a second, but Lindsey Scott, do we think he's still in it for the Walter Payton Award? Or
I'd say maybe. If it was a shootout and here's the thing, like if it was a shootout and he like narrowly lost like the game, then yeah, like he went, throw for throw with Eric Schmid, yes, but they just got boat raced.
Statistically, through 4 games, though, he is a top 3 quarterback in the FCS. So if he continues to have kind of what he did, or at least some semblance of it through his last few games, then we could I think he could still be in the race, because I know it was a terrible game, but he still is statistically one of the best. So I think it's certainly possible. They just they can't lose like that again. If they lose anything more than 20, 30 points, there's no chance. But I think he's still in it. I think maybe we could forget this one if he goes on.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I think this kind of reminds me of 2012 Geno Smith, where he had a phenomenal first month. Him and Tavon Austin, Stedman Bailey too, but once they got blown out by Texas Tech, they went into free fall, and it didn't matter how great Geno Smith's stats were. Like that was like the lasting memory in our head. I feel like that'll just be like the lasting memory in our head. 71-17.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see for sure. I guess a segue to my next guy. I'm gonna show some defensive back love out of Furman, the Paladins out there.
Is it Curse?
Not yeah, it is Curse. Is that your guy?
Oh, nice. Yeah, that was my guy.
Okay, well, also I had another DB then. I'll let you
no. Go ahead, Curse. I've got another guy that's actually like one step ahead of him in my opinion. So go ahead.
Okay.
Talk about my man Darius.
I'm gonna go Darius Curse because he has 3 picks, 3 pass breakups, and 19 tackles on the year for the Paladins. And last week we talked about Jacoby Durant And while out of South Carolina State, while the Bulldogs from Orangeburg won their game against Delaware State, Jacoby Durant was kind of a non-factor, had a TFL. The big stat is like interceptions and pass breakups, the things you'd expect from DBs. And Curse has it, and he'll be in some pretty significant games coming up, whether it's VMI coming up. I mean, that's the one looming on everyone's mind. And I'll have to check more, but I'm not sure if they've played Chattanooga yet. But Chattanooga is another contender. They're ranked in the top 25, and they nearly beat Lending Tree Bowl participant Western Kentucky in the fall. So I think Curse is the guy to look out for if there's going to be a D-back in the thick of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Curse has played really well. Like I said, I was going to mention him as well, just because he's had a great game and he's making a difference. He does have that TFL, so he's making a difference in the backfield too. I think he's put up an interception each of his last 3 games, so it's certainly something that he could win if he keeps that up. My guy that I was gonna go with Curse was if you took this guy for me, Jack McDonald, a linebacker out of Austin P. 13 total tackles, 4 solos and 1.5 TFLs. Not a phenomenal game, but in 3 games played, he has 10 plus tackles per game, 6.5 TFLs, 2.5 sacks. He's just off to a great yard. The reserve tight end and special teamer last year is just like balling out this year. And if he can keep that up, being a front 7 guy, he's definitely got a head start on winning this thing possibly.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Again, like it seems like we're just wearing out the front 7, but like when we say it's a front 7 award, like we actually mean only one winner in the past, and that was back in 2003.
And that guy ended up playing in the NFL for a few years, Rashawn Mathis. For 12 years, like he was very good. So it's going to take that kind of guy to win, for a DB to win it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when we see like that kind of guy, like that's like the type of guy. I'm pretty sure he's one of those guys that is the guy that you call back, that franchises call back so they can retire with him. We can sign one last contract and retire with them. So that seems to be a new standard of greatness.
He was with Jacksonville for a decade. So
yeah, I don't blame them. Yeah. I don't blame them. I think my next guy for sure on defense is Mario Hunter. I'm sorry. I can't read my own handwriting. Sorry. Nicario Hunter out of Jacksonville State. And this is a sneaky good Jacksonville State team, if you can say that, because they played in the fall. So their record's 6-1. They went 3-1 in the fall. And this was a Jacksonville State team that almost beat Florida State. They were up 21-7 on the Seminoles on the road. Something that we like, that Jackson at least likes to joke about, the state of Florida State football. But he's got 50 tackles on the year in 7 games. And surely the stats stack up because he's played more. So maybe that's something that Buck Buchanan voters take into account. And not to mention too, this Jacksonville State team beat Florida International in the fall as well.
Yeah, absolutely. He's off to a great year, and Jacksonville State has played good. I think we'll always remember them as beating Ole Miss in the early 2010s. But yeah, he's off to a great year, and I'm excited to see what Jacksonville State, if they can make some noise maybe in the playoffs too. I just looked it up. So Darius Curse, actually, because I noticed he had 19 tackles. That's second on the Furman team, and first is 28. But and that's going to be a linebacker for you, an inside linebacker, Nick Kuezmaka, if I'm saying that right. But yeah, Curse is just, I think anytime you can make a difference of tackling too, not just making those interceptions, getting those forced fumbles, a couple TFLs, then that's something that can definitely catch your eye. And he's a physical back if he's, a corner and second on the team in tackles.
Yeah. And I think I'm not sure if you have any more guys, Jackson. I got one more guy that's kind of like a sleeper, but I'll let you.
Not from this week. I have some more guys, but go ahead.
Yeah, one more guy of the season that I'm liking, another D-back just to look out for. James Caesar out of SIU, the Salukis, 4-1 in the polls. He's got 8 pass breakups. The tackle stats aren't great, but the 8 pass breakups are great. And I know it's not a sexy stat, and this is coming from like high school experience. I mean, like just playing football, no one likes pass bat downs. I mean, that's why they have the adage that D-backs are only wide receivers that can't catch. And it's true to some degree. Maybe it's the case for Caesar, but that impact 8 pass breakups in 4 games. You just can't deny that, really. I mean, you can't.
I mean, you could make the argument that he's just doing his job, but at the same point, like, why doesn't everyone have 8 pass breakups at that point? He's doing good. And I mean, if we're gonna mention QB hurries, then we should talk about pass breakups. So yeah, he's done a good job. And yeah, that's definitely someone we can keep an eye on. You said he went to SIU. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, Southern Illinois.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the more interesting schools for this year, for sure. Yeah, but kind of moving on. Do you want to go ahead and go to a couple of these talking points we have for this past week?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
So I think if you watched the game, Jackson State was probably one of the more prominent ones, being on ESPN2 and all the Instagram highlights and all that. I think so. Jackson State wouldn't actually be able to go to the FCS playoffs. And I'll let Omar explain that because he's our resident HBCU expert here.
Yeah, I'd say resident. There are certainly a lot more people that know a lot more about HBCU football than I do. But
I am not one of them, so I'll let you explain this.
But really, traditionally, for those of you on opening bowl Saturday, really one of my favorite days of the year, who have noticed preempting the Las Vegas Bowl since 2015 on ABC, the Celebration Bowl, which was the bowl game between the SWAC championships, or SWAC champion, excuse me, the SWAC champion and the MEAC champion, which for the HBCU national title. That's not happening this spring, but that is traditionally the reason why the MEAC and the SWAC do not participate normally in the FCS playoffs. And I know you're wondering, like, okay, so why aren't the MEAC and the SWAC in the playoffs this spring season if there is no Celebration Bowl? Well, on the MEAC's part, they shut down their conference season because more than half their teams decided not to play. The only teams playing MEAC football are Delaware State, South Carolina State, and Howard, the Bison. So the MEAC's technically not going to have a champion. The SWAC, on the other hand, they still have their conference championship game because that gets televised every year on ESPNU. So there's television money involved. There's linear television money involved. And by linear, for our television layman out there, it's just like your traditional channels over the, like, clicker and not really like, ESPN3, who else? ESPN Plus. So that's pretty much the reason why. It's all about money, and for sure, the appetite and the tradition. I think I sent Jackson some tweets about the tradition, the NFL tradition, and the legacy of a lot of HBCUs stack up with Group of 5 schools, even some Power 5 schools in terms of the legends that have come here. We're talking Ken Riley, who needs to be in the Hall of Fame with over 60 career picks for the Bengals, quarterback at Florida A&M, Walter Payton, Doug Williams. The list goes on. That's just a few. But that's a little primer on, like, for those of you wondering that, yes, Jackson State's ranked, but why aren't they going to be in the playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's worth it to keep that tradition, to keep that, because it would be unless Jackson State like won the championship or something, it wouldn't be worth it for them to miss out on that conference championship game. So enjoy your Jackson State football. Enjoy watching Dion with his upside down backwards visor and neck gator just clapping and dancing on the sideline. But they're not going to go to the FCS playoffs. We're not going to see him in Frisco this April. So just know that, and still tune in on ESPNU when that championship game is. So our next point is a kicker, as promised. Specifically from Tennessee State, Antonio Zita kicked a 62, essentially game-winning field goal to beat Eastern Illinois 21-20. With 4 minutes left, he kicked it, and each team did kick another field goal after that. But I mean, if they didn't make that, they didn't win the game. So.
Yeah, like an absolute rocket. Like, just you think about everything involved. Mid-March, in Tennessee, it's not the warmest environment, not the best air, and he kicks an absolute rocket. Oh my goodness! Like I get chills thinking. I love long field goals as a special teams guy. This just gets me going. I mean, I have nothing else really to add. Just an amazing kick, and really shows you why you should be watching this spring season.
And the best part of it is that he entered the transfer portal a week before Sunday, if I remember right. And then he said after the game, this is a sign. I'm staying right here in Tennessee State. So he pulls out of the transfer portal, and just a really feel-good story. So I'm glad he's coming back to TSU. And I mean, he said in pregame that there was a lot of wind, more than usual, but I don't care. 62 yards is impressive. I don't care how much wind there is.
Yeah, I mean, in the words of Elton John, Rocket Man. It's absolutely kicked a rocket.
A big time field goal. And you know what? I don't think we're going to have Tennessee State football talking about them too much again. But what are some games you're looking forward to this weekend?
Yeah, so I'll save the bias with my Patriot League bias, since my second favorite conference since Ivy League's not in session. Holy Cross did win their first game as defending Patriot League champs. They're not playing this week because Fordham has some COVID-19 protocols, so it's a shame that the worldwide renowned Ram Crusader Cup will not be played, and that's a rivalry that's been played in Limerick, Ireland, and Yankee Stadium, and historic and venerable Fitton Field, a place I've been as a kid. So I'm saddened about that. But there are games to watch in the noon slot. Starting off at noon, I'm gonna have to go with. There's a lot of MVFC football. It's like big noon kickoff with MVFC this spring. It's kind of funny. I'm gonna go with a non-conference class, something you don't really see in the 1:00 spot. Dixie State and Kennesaw State, and Kennesaw State has that great triple option offense, and they're a contender in the Big South. I mean, they're the front runner in the Big South. Monmouth, I don't think Monmouth, who also made the playoffs, I don't think they've played a single game. But it'll be interesting to see as Dixie State's still trying to find their way. They got blown out at home against Tarleton State. This will really be their coming out party, like the first big FCS power they've played. So we'll see how they stack up at 1:00 on ESPN Plus.
Yeah, that's a great game. I think since you mentioned the MVSC, I think the most obvious one is going to be North Dakota versus North Dakota State. A lot at stake. North Dakota State wins this, they probably end up winning the MVFC. North Dakota wins this, they are like locked in essentially. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. And it's going to be 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN Plus. First versus second in the MVFC. I mean, I'm excited to watch that one. Two powerhouses.
Yeah, the battle for the Buffalo Nickel, a truly historic rivalry that's been interrupted from time to time with conference realignment, but it's great to have these foes in the same conference again. We've lost too many rivalries to conference realignment. Jackson, can you guess what next game I'm going to mention as another must-watch in the early TV slot?
In the early TV slot?
Yeah, in the early afternoon slot.
When does VMI play?
Yeah, 1:00, 1 p.m. against Samford, and this is a Samford team that puts up points. Like, this is absolutely VMI's first test. They beat Western Carolina. They beat Furman. Furman's 3-1, and that was, I mean, maybe VMI's real just based on that Furman win, but Samford puts up points. They put up 55 against Western Carolina, 37 against Furman, who has a solid defense, and 37 against Wofford, a traditional power in the SoCon. So that defense will be tested. We'll finally see if maybe Reese Udinsky can go throw for throw with another quarterback if he has to, which I don't doubt he can since he's transferring to Maryland in the fall. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Came off from they went from a 55-point win to a 44-37 loss in overtime to a 6-point win last week. I'm excited to see what Samford can do. More importantly, I'm excited to see what VMI can do as a defense and see if they can keep them to 17 points or less would be the record for this year.
Yeah. And then I don't know if you have another game to watch, Jackson, before I go on to my next one.
I do. I have a couple more. This one I don't really need to explain too much. SDSU and Southern Illinois. SDSU is 3-1. Southern Illinois is 4-1. Third versus fourth in the MVFC. So I guess I'm just a big MVFC fan today. That's going to be 1 Eastern time on ESPN Plus. The only one that was really off the radar that I wanted to mention was Southeast Louisiana at Incarnate Word. Southeastern Louisiana, their only loss is by 5 points to Sam Houston State. We saw what they did last weekend. Incarnate Word, 2 straight victories of 20-plus points. So I'm excited to see what they can both do. That's going to be 3:00 Eastern time on ESPN Plus.
Yeah, great games. I mean, if you want to see the points, go to the Southland for sure. It must be, especially those those new WAC teams that'll be going. They must be carrying on the tradition of WACtion. I'm gonna old habits die hard for me in my next game. I'm gonna go back to the Patriot League, and I'm gonna go Lafayette Bucknell. Bucknell. This is a program that I have a lot of high hopes in, despite being a Holy Cross fan. Because if Holy Cross doesn't win the Patriot League, I'd be happy if Bucknell did. As Bucknell has not been to the postseason since the 1935 Orange Bowl, a victory over the Miami Hurricanes. And how cool would that be? First postseason appearance. And also on the other podcast with Marshall, I have said that it would be a sign that I am finally due for a girlfriend. So we'll see if if my fortunes will be good come that game.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Not so fast, my friend. Yeah, another one that I wanted to mention, if you're like me and you're curious about Nicholls State, they've got a bye week this week. They're going to face Incarnate Word Saturday, March 27th. So we're going to have to wait a little bit to see how they bounce back. But maybe it'll give them a chance to kind of regroup and hopefully get another W. If you're curious, because I know this has been a problem for me, and this isn't like a ad or anything, but if you're looking for an app to find a good place, like to see the scores, because the ESPN app is terrible about that, there's an app literally called The Score, and just sorted by FCS football, and they go by, I think it's like week 27 at this point, something like that, just because of the fall season. And yeah, it's like a great place to actually like see the scores in one spot, because ESPN's done a terrible job. Whenever I search college football scores today, I don't want to see like it for August of this year. Like, I'm not interested in that. Sometimes we want to watch something other than Clemson. So that's just a great app I found to see all the scores for the FCS action.
Yeah, for sure. I love the ESPN app otherwise, but I might check out The Score because it gets annoying having to scroll through and actually choose FCS football for scores. I'm disappointed in ESPN, but I'm not surprised. I mean, ESPN loves their brands. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
So,
they sure do love their brands. That is for
it
sure.
is what it is. So I think my last game that I'm going to choose out of the Pioneer Football League, and that's a non-scholarship program, a non-scholarship conference of a bunch of basketball schools, which includes San Diego, who plays basketball in the West Coast Conference, well, Olympic sports, but mostly basketball in the West Coast Conference. Butler in the Big East, who will play this week. Drake, who's in the tourney, out of the Missouri Valley Conference, which is different than the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Important distinction. You get the idea. A lot of basketball schools there. Davidson in the A10. But this week, San Diego puts their 38-game conference winning streak on the line against the Butler Bulldogs. And Butler hasn't really ever been good in the past 20 years or so or more in football. But this past week, San Diego had trouble in Iowa against Drake, as they only beat Drake 13-10. Their offense struggled at times. They had 3 turnovers, and they let Drake stay around despite Drake only having 25 yards of offense. Drake scored 10 points. That is impressive. I'm so impressed for that. Like I'm impressed with that defense. I'm impressed with everything. Like, my mind's blown.
That is what you call a solid defensive performance. That's insane. Was it a lot of turnovers, I'm guessing, or?
Yeah, so San Diego threw a pick, and Drake had a 22-yard drive early on in the game to score a touchdown. They only had 3 total yards the rest of the game, which is it's crazy. That's like whenever I'd send you the screenshots to my NCAA football 2000 escapades, trying to run the option stubbornly and like be winning a game 3-0 with like 30 yards of offense.
I mean, you've won games like 6-3 and stuff like that, so it can be done. Don't doubt it. Usually, people usually complain Madden's so unrealistic, and like video game football, it's just all scoring points. Omar's the opposite. If you haven't watched his Twitch streams, which you're missing out if you haven't. So, I mean, it is defense. So, and when his little brother joins the chat, makes it all the better. Keep coming.
Please don't embolden him, Jackson. Do not. That young man needs no emboldening. So
you should bring him on your staff as like an advisor, and just like if Nick Saban was like I don't know.
He'll just want to throw the ball the whole time.
Yeah.
Kid.
That doesn't work. He needs to learn. He needs to learn the olden days where you run the ball.
Yeah, 3 yards in the cloud of dust.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, another exciting week of FCS football too, and really, we had some neutral site action too at the lower levels, something that I watch rather than FCS football at times. We had a game at Venerable Little Rock Stadium, I guess a quadruple header on Saturday and Sunday at War Memorial Stadium. Some good games out of D3. You had the Gulf Coast Challenge at historic Ladd Peebles Stadium with Savannah State and West Alabama, and also too you had Grambling Prairie View in the State Fair Classic this past weekend. No neutral site action this week, but it's always cool to see neutral site games, get that nice bowl environment in the spring. Yeah. But Jackson,
And,
you have any final remarks?
Of course, the People's Championship in FCF. We haven't mentioned it, but it's going to be the Glacier Boys and the Wild Aces. Tune in on Twitch to that one for the FCS Championship. And yeah, we actually got to vote. I don't know if you did, but we voted on what the championship name would be on their website, and it came out to the People's Championship, which I think is awesome because you vote on like literally everything in that app. So yeah, I'm excited to see that. And I mean, what better things do you have to do on a Saturday night than to watch FCF football? That's like glorified what is it, like 7-on-7? So
Yeah.
It's awesome. I'm excited to see that.
I mean, maybe to me, I would be saying that, Jackson. I mean, I'm a single man at a military academy, but you got a girlfriend, man, and you're not in a military academy.
Well, she'll be watching with me. So
that's
obviously,
good. That's goals, really. Man. That's goals. Yeah. I mean,
I
like it.
That'll get you a girlfriend that loves FCF.
I like it.
She never listens this far in the podcast, so I can say all this.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I mean, the FCF is really proof that democracy works in the 21st century.
Let's do. I think. I mean, they've got Richard Sherman and all kinds of people working on it. Let's do it. Get them running our government.
I will just say this. I love the FCF, and I'll leave it at that. For anything
live stream Twitch statement. Congress and have everyone vote that way. 10 times more efficient.
But I think before I say anything gets me in trouble, I think this is a good time to step off.
Hey, we only got off topic once about something that was kind of on topic, actually. So we can.
Yeah. Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, unless Jackson has anything else to say, it's been great.
I'm all good. Yeah. Happy NFL New Year today, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's
4 p.m. Eastern time. The new year starts. So
yeah, a lot of
get
big
out your party hats and your little confetti and some champagne. We'll enjoy free agency.
Yeah, for sure. So enjoy that. Enjoy FCF. Enjoy FCS. And until next time, peace, love, and soul, everyone.
Go Nicholls.
Oh, shoot.